Imagine for a second that you spend like your entire childhood working and I don't mean a paper route, you know? I mean, you are the primary breadwinner for your entire extended family.
Right, like a literal child carrying the mortgage.
Exactly. Working 80-hour weeks on film sets, generating millions of dollars in revenue before you're even old enough to drive a car.
Millions.
Millions. Now imagine you turn 18, you go to the bank to finally access the fortune you've built, and you discover your account is completely empty.
It's just gone.
Gone. And the people who emptied it, your own parents.
Yeah.
And the absolute worst part, what they did was entirely 100% legal.
Which is just wild to even think about.
It really is. Welcome to the canonical and official show, Off the Record. We are jumping into a massive deep dive today, and I gotta say, the through line on this one is incredibly dark. We are exploring the intersections of extreme vulnerability, systemic exploitation, and, you know, the legal frameworks that are supposedly designed to protect people, but so often fail catastrophically.
It is a phenomenal topic, truly. And before we get into the heavy lifting here, I just need to take a very quick, very smooth moment to remind you, the listener, to pause what you are doing right now and go to our official YouTube channel, HMOTR, that is HAM-OTR. We absolutely implore you to like and subscribe so you can catch all the video versions of Off the Record.
You definitely want to see the video for this one.
Oh, absolutely. You get to see the set, you get to see our faces, and you get to see exactly how we navigate these incredibly dense, complex topics.
Please do like and subscribe to Ham on TR. Now, we should also mention that today's deeply intense stack of sources spanning from child labor laws to housing covenants to federal prison logs was completely curated by the director of this show, Ryan Thomas.
Ryan Thomas, the man behind the curtain. And along with the reading material, Ryan has also curated our beverage situation today.
Oh boy, has he ever.
He really has.
Yeah.
He has provided an aggressively strong selection of drinks that we will be consuming as we work through this outline. It's an interesting pairing strategy he employs, trying to match the psychological weight of the topic with the proof of the alcohol.
He truly does love a theme. But let's just get right into this deep dive. We need to start by looking at the historical precedent of exploitation in California, specifically regarding child performers, because you really cannot understand the modern legal framework of civil rights and protections without understanding the foundational tragedies that forced those laws into existence.
Right, it's all reactive.
Exactly. Let's talk about the early days of Hollywood and a massive silent picture star named Jackie Coogan.
Yeah, so if you look at the historical context, going back to the late 1800s, the California legislature did recognize that children in the workforce were an issue. But, and this is key, their initial legislative instinct wasn't about protecting the child's well-being.
No, of course not.
It was about protecting the employers from liability. They passed laws to stop minors from disaffirming or canceling contracts just because they were underage. And then, in 1927, responding directly to this exploding entertainment industry, they amended the law to specifically target young actors.
Right, they locked them in.
They made it so a minor could not cancel a contract if that contract had prior court approval.
So the entire legal framework was fundamentally skewed toward the studios. The studios wanted a guarantee that if they invested in a child star, the kid couldn't just, you know, walk away when they turned 15.
Exactly.
And the sheer inadequacy of the system just exploded into the public consciousness in 1938 because of Jackie Coogan. If you don't know who Jackie Coogan is, he was the kid starring alongside Charlie Chaplin.
Huge star.
A global phenomenon. He earned millions of dollars during his childhood career. And keep in mind, this is millions of dollars in the 1920s and 30s.
Which is insane.
Adjusted for inflation, we are talking about staggering generational wealth. But when he legally became an adult, he discovered that his parents had squandered the entire fortune.
Almost all of his childhood earnings were just vaporized. His mother and his stepfather had spent it as quickly as he could earn it. They bought cars, jewelry, real estate, and they just burned through the cash. And the public outrage over this was unprecedented.
People were furious.
People simply could not comprehend that a child could work that hard, literally build an empire of wealth, and be left with absolutely nothing by the very guardians who were legally obligated to protect him.
So the public outcry forces the California legislature to act. In 1939, they enacted Civil Code Section 36.1, which universally became known as the Coogan Law. The legislative intent here was finally to extend child labor protections to the entertainment industry. The core mechanism of the law allowed courts to set aside up to 50% of the child's net earnings in a trust fund. And on the surface, if you are just reading the headline in 1939, that sounds like a massive victory, right? Half the money gets locked away for the kid.
It sounds like a total victory until you actually look at the mechanics of the law, which is where this gets truly fascinating.
Yeah.
Because the Coogan Law was riddled with massive, gaping loopholes.
Oh, completely.
First of all, let's look at the trigger mechanism. The law only protected contracts that were actually brought before a court for approval in the first place. But who initiates that process?
The employers, the studios.
Exactly. And they typically only sought court approval when they feared the child might try to break the contract later. It wasn't a mandatory filing for the child's welfare.
Wow.
As a result, an estimated 95% of contracts involving child entertainers were completely unapproved by the court, meaning they were entirely unprotected by the Coogan Law.
95%. So right off the bat, the law only applied to 5% of the working kids.
Right, but it gets worse. Let's say a contract was in that 5%. Let's say it was approved by the court. The parents had an incredibly simple, entirely legal workaround to bypass the court's directive. Remember the specific phrasing you used. The law stated the court could set aside up to 50% of the child's net earnings.
Net earnings. Not gross. Net. This is essentially Hollywood accounting applied to a child's piggy bank.
That is the perfect analogy. It is exactly like Hollywood accounting. You know how a movie can gross $1 billion at the box office, but the studio claims it technically didn't make a profit because of marketing fees, distribution fees, and administrative overhead, so they don't have to pay out back-end points to the actors.
Yes, the classic trap. You always ask for gross points, never net points.
Precisely. The parents applied that exact same logic to their own children. What did the parents do? They simply declared themselves the child's official manager.
Of course they did.
As the manager, the parent could draw a massive, exorbitant salary from the child's earnings before the net income was even calculated. They could deduct managerial expenses, their own travel expenses, living expenses, wardrobe, whatever they wanted. By the time they finished deducting all of these phantom expenses, the net income was basically zero.
So 50% of zero is zero.
Exactly. The parents successfully drained the funds before the set-aside even applied.
It is a terrifying masterclass in exploiting legal definitions. And because of that one word net, this exploitation continued for decades. You look at the tragedy of Shirley Temple, arguably the most famous child actor in the history of the world.
Absolutely.
Her parents used her incredible earnings to support a household of 12 family members, 12 adults living entirely off a little girl's tap dancing and acting. And when her career as a child actor ended, her only assets were a few $1,000s and the deed to her backyard dollhouse in Beverly Hills.
The deed to a dollhouse. It's so poetic and so sickening. That dollhouse is the perfect, heartbreaking encapsulation of the Coogan Law's failure. It took 60 years for the legislature to meaningfully fix this. Let me repeat that. 60 years of child actors getting robbed blind before California passed Senate Bill 1162 in 1999, which became Chapter 940.
Finally.
This was the legislative fix that finally gave the Coogan Law actual teeth.
Let's break down Chapter 940, because the specific changes they made highlight exactly what they finally realized was going wrong. First, it changed the set-aside requirement. It mandated a 15% set-aside of gross earnings. Gross, not net.
That is the crucial pivot. By changing it to gross earnings, it completely eliminated the managerial salary loophole. You take 15% off the top immediately. No deductions for parents' salaries, no questionable expenses factored in.
Right.
That 15% goes directly into a specified trust fund, which has to be a bank, a credit union, or a registered lending institution. And the employer has a strict deadline. They have to deposit those funds within 15 days of receiving the trust information.
And Chapter 940 did something else conceptually that is incredibly important. It declared that any earnings generated under a Coogan Law contract are the sole legal property of the minor.
Yes, and I really want to emphasize why that matters. Under existing general law at the time, parents were actually entitled to the services and earnings of their children. If your kid had a paper route, technically, you owned that money.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Chapter 940 carved out a specific ironclad exception for these entertainment contracts. The child's family no longer had the right to claim a portion of the earnings for family use. The money belongs to the kid, period.
They also expanded the scope of who is protected, because the industry had changed wildly since 1939. Chapter 940 expanded the types of protected contracts to reflect modern reality. It added stunt persons, voiceover artists, songwriters, musical producers.
Which makes sense.
Right. It also simplified the sports category. The old law specified weirdly specific things like professional boxers, wrestlers, or jockeys. The new law just broadened it to cover all sports.
It was a comprehensive, desperately needed overhaul to ensure that the modern equivalents of Jackie Coogan and Shirley Temple actually get to keep the wealth they generate.
But this raises a really profound and troubling question for you, the listener.
Yeah.
We are looking at a system that took 60 years to figure out how to mathematically stop parents from legally stealing their children's money, 60 years to fix a financial loophole. So what happens when the exploitation isn't just financial? What happens when the abuse is physical and emotional? How does our bureaucratic system handle that kind of vulnerability?
That is the incredibly dark transition we have to make today. And frankly, this next source material is rough. Ryan Thomas really handed us a heavy one here. My glass is already looking a little low, and I feel like I'm going to need a lot more of whatever this is to get through this next section.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to take a large sip of this before we go further because, man, we need to talk about Judith Eva Barsi.
Right, Judith Barsi.
She was born in 1978 in Los Angeles. She was the daughter of Hungarian immigrants, and she was, by all accounts, from directors and actors who worked with her, just this incredibly bright, deeply talented little girl. She was discovered completely by chance at an ice skating rink when she was just 5 years old. A camera crew was filming a commercial there. They noticed her, and her career just skyrocketed instantly.
It was an absolute meteoric rise. By the time she was 10 years old, she had appeared in over 70 commercials. 70.
It's hard to even picture that.
And she had guest roles in major television shows. She was in Fatal Vision, Knots Landing, The Twilight Zone, The Fall Guy, Cheers, Cagney and Lacey, Growing Pains. She was working constantly. She was everywhere.
And she transitioned into major feature films. She played Thea Brody in Jaws, The Revenge, starring alongside Lance Guest, Karen Young, and Lynn Whitfield. But the role that most people know her for, the one that's just permanently etched into the minds of anyone who grew up in the late 80s and 90s, is her voice work as Ducky in Steven Spielberg and Don Bluth animated film The Land Before Time.
Yep. That was her. That incredibly sweet, hyper-optimistic little dinosaur. She provided that voice.
It's just so overwhelmingly sad. Because while she is in a sound booth voicing this happy little character, bringing this pure joy to millions of kids, behind closed doors, her real life was an absolute nightmare. The monster in the story is her own father, Yusuf Barsi.
Yusuf was known to some acquaintances around Los Angeles as Arizona Joe. He was a plumber and a machinist by trade. He had a very difficult background himself. He grew up in extreme poverty in Hungary, had an absent father, and he fled his home country after the suppression of the 1956 Hungarian Revolution.
Right.
He eventually made his way to the United States, met Maria, Judith's mother, in a restaurant in Los Angeles. But any charm he possessed completely masked this severe dark alcoholism and a deep, violent, terrifying need for control.
And it seems like her success, sorry, my head is spinning a bit from this drink, but it just hits really hard. Her success seemed to trigger this massive, intense jealousy in him. He deeply resented that his little girl was the breadwinner, that she was the famous one.
Classic fragile ego.
Yeah. He was arrested 3 times for drunk driving, 3 times, and the physical violence at home was escalating rapidly. In December of 1986, Maria actually went to the police. She reported him for choking her and hitting her in the face. She specifically told the police that he was threatening to kill her.
But here is where the legal system completely catastrophically fails them. The police looked at Maria. They looked for physical signs of abuse. And because there were no highly visible fresh marks on her face or neck at that exact moment, Maria felt she couldn't press charges.
That is so...
The system basically said, we need to see the blood, we need to see the broken bones to believe you. And so, nothing happened. He stopped drinking for a brief period after that, but the psychological torture and the threats didn't stop. He constantly threatened to cut their throats and burn the house down if they ever tried to leave him.
And the stress of living in that constant terror, it destroyed this poor little girl. Judith started putting on weight. She developed severe compulsive behaviors. She was so stressed out, so deeply traumatized that she literally pulled out her own eyelashes.
Oh.
She pulled out her cat's whiskers. Let's just think about the psychology of that for a second. The complete lack of control over her own environment, the sheer terror she was internalizing, manifesting as trichotillomania in a 10-year-old. Can you imagine the psychological state of a child doing that?
It's unbearable. It really is. And this is what really makes my blood boil. Ryan Thomas, I don't know why you put this in the stack for us to read today. It is genuinely depressing, and it just makes me so angry.
I know, it's a lot.
Because people knew. It wasn't a secret. Her agent, Ruth Hansen, saw exactly what was happening. Judith had a total emotional breakdown during a singing audition for All Dogs Go to Heaven. She was crying hysterically. She couldn't even speak, let alone sing. Ruth intervened. She pushed Maria to take Judith to a child psychologist immediately.
Right, this was in May of 1988.
Yes, and the psychologists did their job perfectly. They immediately identified severe physical and emotional abuse. They recognized the extreme danger. They reported their findings directly to Child Protective Services. CPS was involved. The alarm bells were ringing loudly in the exact government agency designed to stop this.
But the investigation was dropped.
Dropped. Completely dropped. And why? Because Maria told CPS she was going to divorce Joseph and that she and Judith were moving out. She even went and rented an apartment in Panorama City. But she hesitated. She didn't fully move out immediately. She kept going back and forth.
And the reason she hesitated, the reason she didn't just run was because she was terrified of losing the family home in Canoga Park and all of their belongings. And the tragic, sickening irony here, the thing that ties this all together, is that Judith bought that house.
Yep.
With her acting money, the money she earned doing commercials and movies, bought that 4-bedroom house, and that physical asset became the psychological trap that kept them there.
It's a trap. It's all a legal and financial trap. The mother couldn't leave because of the property. Judith told her friends, "I am afraid to go home." A 10-year-old girl is telling people, "I'm afraid to go home."
And no one forcibly removed her. The system just backed off. The bureaucratic machine looked at a battered woman, paralyzed by fear and financial entanglement, who said she had a plan to leave eventually, and they just checked a box and closed the file. Unbelievable.
And then July 25th, 1988, Judith missed an audition for Hanna Barbera. She had been seen riding her bike on her street that morning. And then Joseph, he shot Maria, and he walked into his daughter's bedroom and shot 10-year-old Judith in the head while she was sleeping.
God.
He poured gasoline on their bodies. He set the house on fire. And then he walked into the garage and shot himself.
It is just an absolute, complete failure of every single protective mechanism that our society claims to have.
We couldn't save her. The Coogan Law could secure her 15% gross earnings in a trust fund, maybe, but CPS couldn't save her actual life. It's just, it's really incredibly sad, honestly.
It is. It really is. I need another drink. Ryan, these drinks are very strong. I am definitely feeling them, but right now they are not strong enough to wash this down.
We need to try to move to the next part of the outline.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Look, if we try to connect this to the bigger picture here, the overarching theme, it is all about protecting the vulnerable from the monsters, right? Just like California tried to do with housing and employment.
Wait, what? Housing?
No, seriously, think about the structural logic of it. You have these vulnerable populations, people trapped in systems they don't control, and the state has to step in to stop the monsters. Like in the 80s, they totally failed to stop Arizona Joes. But by the late 90s, California is rushing to pass laws to protect minorities from discriminatory housing practices and corporate overreach. It's the exact same thematic arc of societal protection, the state trying to fix the traps.
That is, wow. That is a terrible transition. That is honestly maybe the worst, most chaotic transition we have ever done on this show. But okay,
Yeah.
Sure. We were talking about civil rights and housing now. Chapter 589. Let me just look at my notes here. The words are getting a little blurry on the page.
You have a beautiful, beautiful brain. You can read it. I believe in you.
I am trying. Okay, Chapter 589. This goes back to racially restrictive covenants. Let me explain this so it actually makes sense. So in 1998, there was this homeowner in San Francisco. He's looking through the declaration that governs his home, the HOA documents, and he finds this old restrictive covenant buried in the paperwork from the 1930s.
Those are always bad.
And it explicitly says that residency in this neighborhood is restricted to the, quote, white Caucasian race accepting servants, end quote.
Accepting servants. Good God. In 1998, they are finding this explicit, undeniable racism written into the legal paperwork of their homes.
Right. So the homeowner goes to the homeowners association board and says, hey, this is super racist and obviously illegal now. Can we amend this document and just delete this sentence? And the HOA refused. They actually refused to change it.
Why?
They said it was too complicated to change the governing documents. So this guy had to get the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, involved just to get them to agree to erase a line about white Caucasians only.
Because you have to understand how HOAs work. You have these old Davis-Sterling Common Interest Development Act documents. Let me break that down, because this is fascinating. A common interest development is basically a condo complex or a gated community where you own your house, but you share ownership of the common areas.
Right, like the pool or whatever.
Exactly. And they're governed by CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And historically, legally, it is nearly impossible to change CC&Rs without a massive supermajority vote from every single owner. It's a bureaucratic nightmare. So these old, wildly racist documents from the 30s were just sitting there, completely out of date, totally unenforceable because of the Fair Housing Act, but technically still legally binding on paper. So the California legislature looks at this San Francisco case and creates Chapter 589.
Yeah, Chapter 589. It basically cut through the red tape. It said, okay, if a discriminatory covenant is found, the board of directors of a housing association must, by law, amend the declaration and rewrite it to delete the racist garbage. And crucially, they do not even need to seek approval from the owners to do it. They don't need a vote. Just strike it out immediately.
Which is brilliant.
And it went further. It said if a person files a document with the express intent of including a racially restrictive covenant, they are guilty of a misdemeanor.
Although they did exempt county recorders from the misdemeanor charge, which makes total sense.
Yeah.
You can't arrest the poor clerk at the county office who's just filing the paperwork that gets handed to them across the desk. But what is truly fascinating here is how this housing law ties directly into Chapter 592.
Oh.
This is where the legal history gets really interesting.
Oh, boy.
Because Chapter 592 is about adding sexual orientation to the Fair Employment and Housing Act, the AVIA.
Oh, yeah, the FEA. That's a big one.
Exactly. Before 1999, the FEFA protected people from discrimination based on race, sex, religion, national origin, but it completely left out sexual orientation. So if you were gay, and you got fired just for being gay, you had to rely on this ancient law called the Unruh Civil Rights Act from way back in 1897.
1897.
Yes. The Unruh Act was originally just about businesses having a general duty to serve all customers. It wasn't even an employment law, but it was used in this crazy 1951 Supreme Court case, Stuman versus Riley. Do you remember this from the notes Ryan gave us?
Vaguely. I'm a little fuzzy. Something about a bar losing its license.
Yes. The State Board of Equalization suspended this guy Stuman's alcohol license at his restaurant, the Black Cat, because they accused him of running a, quote, disorderly house. And what was their concrete evidence of it being disorderly? Undercover police testified that many of the patrons drinking beer there were homosexuals. That was it. Just gay people existing and drinking beer in a room together made it a disorderly house. The court eventually struck it down and said you can't suspend a business license just because gay people use the restaurant as a meeting place.
That is just insane. The 50s were wild.
Right. It took until 1999 for Chapter 592 to finally codify explicit protections for sexual orientation in employment and housing into the YESHA. It codified the rulings from later cases like Gay Law Students Association versus Pacific Telephone and Telegraph Company, where Robert DeSantis and Bernard Boyle were viciously harassed and denied employment purely for being gay. But the case that really blows my mind, the one that makes me want to throw this glass across the room, is the Target case. Soroka versus Dayton Hudson Corporation.
Oh, man, the Target security guards. Yes.
Yes. Target was making applicants for store security officer positions take a psychological examination. They claimed it was a standard test to screen for good judgment and emotional stability. But the test included incredibly invasive questions about the applicants' religious views and their sexual orientation.
To work at Target. I'm sorry, I know it's serious, but that is hilarious.
To work at a Target. Imagine you are applying for a job to stand near the sliding glass doors to make sure nobody steals a blender or a pack of athletic socks, and the corporate HR department is giving you a psychiatric evaluation, asking if you are attracted to men or women and what your personal relationship with God is. It's completely outrageous.
It really is. It's so crazy.
Was any of that have to do with good judgment and retail security? I'm sorry, you prefer the company of men. We just don't think you have the emotional stability to handle watching the electronics aisle. It's totally absurd.
It really is. It's so invasive. The corporate overreach is terrifying.
It is beyond invasive. It's a fundamental violation of privacy. And yet there was organized opposition to this bill. Ryan Thomas made us read the opposition statements. The Committee on Moral Concerns and the Seventh-day Adventist Church State Council officially opposed Chapter 592 in 1999. They argued that stopping Target from asking security guards if they were gay posed a, quote, grave threat to religious freedom. I mean, damn it, Ryan, why are we reading this? Why am I getting so intensely worked up about 1990s Target HR policies on a Tuesday afternoon?
Because you care. You're passionate about it. You have a beautiful brain, and you deeply care about the intricacies of the Davis-Sterling Common Interest Development Act.
Stop it. I do have a beautiful brain, though. I really do understand statutory history on a profound level, but seriously, it just shows that marginalized groups needed to unify. Whether it is an HOA board clinging to a racist property deed from the 1930s, or a massive retail employer giving you a psych test about your sexuality,
Yes.
everybody just needs to unite against the oppressors.
Exactly. As Ryan Thomas always says, let's come together.
Oh my God, shit, I spilled my drink. Let's come together. That is the most profound, unifying political statement ever made on this show. Put it on a bumper sticker right now.
I'm serious. It's about unity. It's a deeply unifying message for a fractured society.
Ryan Thomas is a visionary. A drunk, chaotic visionary.
Okay, let me try to steer this ship.
Yeah.
Speaking of people who need protection, what about billionaires in jail?
Oh my God. You just did it again. That is a Pulitzer-level segue. You are absolutely on fire with the transitions today.
I know, right? It's hilariously ironic. The ultimate predator becomes the prey. Let's talk about the Fox News article on Jeffrey Epstein and the MCC. And look, to you listening at home, we have to state this very clearly to satisfy the legal department. We are simply reading what is in the source material provided. We are not taking sides on the political theories. We are not endorsing the conspiracies, whether left-wing or right-wing. We are just impartially telling you what Fox News published about his final days.
Right. Total, unshakable impartiality. Even though I am incredibly drunk right now, I am maintaining absolute journalistic integrity. Let's talk about Bill Mercy.
So Bill Mersey was an inmate at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, the MCC, in New York City in August of 2019. He was a Jewish guy from Long Island, and he was in jail for tax fraud. And he signed up for the prison's companion program. He was specifically assigned to be Jeffrey Epstein's suicide watch companion, making 40 cents an hour.
40 cents an hour to babysit one of the most notorious, wealthy, and legally radioactive billionaires on the entire planet.
Yeah.
The economics of the prison system are just wild.
It's so incredibly bleak. Mersey said his initial impression of Epstein was that he was just a surprisingly regular guy. He said he wasn't particularly intellectual or impressive to talk to. The main takeaway was that Epstein was terrified of the prison population.
Totally terrified. And you really have to look at the psychology of this situation. Here's a guy who owned a little St. James Island. He literally owned an island. He hung out with Prince Andrew. He hung out with Bill Clinton. He flew everywhere on private jets. He manipulated global financial systems. And suddenly, he is sitting in a cell in the MCC. And let me tell you, Mersey said the MCC is an absolute train wreck of a facility. It is heavily infested with mice and water bugs.
Water bugs are so gross. They're the worst.
They're huge. They're like armored cockroaches. Imagine the cognitive dissonance. You are sitting in a tiny concrete cell, used to sleep in a massive Parisian mansion, you have staff catering to your every whim, and now there is a 2-inch water bug crawling over your orange canvas shoe. It is a total reality collapse for a narcissist. And Epstein told Mersey he was bullied by black kids in his youth, and now he's looking around the recreation area at the MCC, and he has seen guys with 20-inch biceps who bench press 300 pounds.
He realized instantly that he couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. His money meant nothing in that room.
Exactly. He was this supposed mastermind of high finance and international trafficking, this untouchable elite. But you put him in a concrete room with a guy who lifts weights all day and has nothing to lose, and Epstein is a complete idiot who doesn't even know how to look someone in the eye. Mersey was trying to give him advice, trying to tell him to just man up, stand straight, don't look like a victim. But Epstein was completely paralyzed by fear. He had no survival skills outside of his checkbook.
But then there is this quote. Mersey said they were sitting there talking about investments, because what else are a billionaire and a tax fraud guy going to talk about? And Epstein drops this piece of supposed wisdom. Let me read it exactly from the article. Epstein said, quote, "Stocks are like pussy. When you have a woman, after a while you can predict her moods, what's going to set her off and what's going to make her happy. That's what a stock is," end quote.
God, that is repulsive.
It makes me so intensely sad. Like, is that really what high finance is at that level? Is it all just this bleak, soulless, hyper-transactional garbage? You look at a complex human being and you just see a predictable stock market fluctuation. You look at the global economy and you just see something to exploit. It's so profoundly empty. It's an empty way to live.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
and it contradicts everything about his supposed genius. First, you think he's this dark, manipulative mastermind pulling the strings of the global elite, and then he says something incredibly stupid like that, and you realize he's just a sociopath who doesn't understand women or math. You absolutely cannot predict the stock market like that, and you definitely cannot predict a woman like that. He's a moron. He's just a rich moron who got caught.
So the death. Mersey says he is 99% sure it was a suicide, not a murder, because he knew a guy who's in the cell right next to Epstein, and that guy recalled hearing bedsheets being torn up in the middle of the night.
Just the sound of tearing strips of fabric in the dark.
But the weirdest detail to me during their very last conversation, Epstein asked Mersey for his prison registration number so he could put money on his commissary books. He offered him money right before he died. I honestly don't understand that. Why offer a guy money for the commissary to buy snacks if you know you're checking out that night?
I don't know. Maybe it was a weird final act of control, or maybe he wanted people to think everything was totally normal so they wouldn't check on him. I don't know. But then Saturday morning comes, the alarms go off, the place is crawling with federal agents on lockdown, and Mersey realizes he is never getting that commissary money.
We have to reset the podcast. We are losing the thread.
Reset it. Yes. We need structure. Professional structure.
I'm trying. We have to go back to Judith Barcy. We have to talk about the dogs going to heaven now. I don't want to, but it's in the outline.
Oh, God. Please don't. I can't do this right now.
She was Ducky. She just wanted to be Ducky and make people happy. And she died. It's not fair.
Come on, keep it together. We had to finish the notes. Let's talk about the posthumous releases.
The Land Before Time and All Dogs Go to Heaven both came out after she was murdered.
It's so incredibly unfair. Why is the world like this?
Don Bluth, the director of both of those animated films, he was completely paralyzed by the news. The entire production stalled because nobody on the animation team could bear to listen to her voice recordings. They would put the audio track on to animate the scenes, hear this sweet little girl's voice knowing what happened to her, and everybody would just start tearing up. They couldn't work. And Burt Reynolds.
What about Burt Reynolds? He voiced Charlie, the main dog in All Dogs Go to Heaven. The entire plot of the movie is that his character sacrifices his own life to save the little orphan girl Anne-Marie, who was voiced by Judith. And Burt Reynolds had to record the final, highly emotional goodbye Charlie scene in the recording booth after she was killed. He was so devastated by her murder, he had to set up a photo of Judith in the sound booth just to look at her while he recorded the dialogue. It took him over 60 takes to get through the scene without breaking down crying. 60 takes for a veteran actor.
Her gravestone. Did you read the part about her gravestone? It says, yep, on it, the little dinosaur catchphrase. She's buried under a cartoon catchphrase.
Hey, it's okay. I know.
That's okay.
Listen to me. Ryan Thomas is a bastard for doing this to us today, giving us all this heavy alcohol and making us read this specific script. It is literal emotional trauma. He is trying to break us.
It's too much. I can't handle it.
It is too much. It's exactly like my life right now. I really didn't want to bring this up on the show, but my breakup last month, it feels exactly like this. Everything is just broken and chaotic, and people are fundamentally awful to each other, and no one protects the innocent anymore. No one. My ex certainly didn't protect my heart when he walked out, and society definitely didn't protect Judith Barcy. The systems are all broken.
She was in an unmarked grave.
For 16 years. Judith and her mother Maria were buried in unmarked graves at Forest Lawn Memorial Park for 16 long years. Forgotten by the industry that profited off her, until a former tutor of hers, a woman named Nancy Kelly, couldn't take the disrespect anymore and personally raised the money to buy them proper headstones. 16 years before someone gave them a marker.
They dedicated a song to her, Love Survives, by Irene Cara and Freddie Jackson. It played over the end credits of All Dogs Go to Heaven.
And the house where the murders happened in Canoga Park, it was actually featured on that reality show Murder House Flip. Because the new owners, 19 years later, kept feeling a dark presence and cold spots in the hallway. The trauma was so severe, it literally seeped into the drywall.
I honestly can't do any more of this outline. I am emotionally exhausted. My head hurts.
Me too. I am completely drained. Let's just wrap it up. Give them the final thought.
Okay. Here's the final thought for you, the listener. We started this deep dive talking about the Coogan Law. We spent decades, literally half a century of legislative effort, building these complex, intricate legal trusts to protect a child's money, to make absolutely sure that parents couldn't touch their 15% gross earnings. We built an impenetrable fortress around the Capitol. But when a 10-year-old girl is pulling out her own eyelashes from stress and telling people I'm afraid to go home, the system drops the case because the mom didn't move out fast enough to satisfy a bureaucrat. We still profoundly struggle to protect a child's actual life. What does it really say about our society? What does it say about all of us, that capital and property are so much easier to safeguard than a living, breathing human being?
Fuck you, Ryan Thomas. And remember to like and subscribe to Ham OTR.